Hello, folks. Welcome back to WW2 TV. And this is the second of our How to Be a Historian shows, which is kind of a loose heading for just talking to creators and writers and museum owners and people who do different ways of sharing history. And today I have Paul here from History Rage. The links to History Rage social media all in the description below. And there are other links about running podcasts that Paul will get to when he gets talking. If you're new to the channel, a few new people over the last few days, welcome aboard. That description there below you is where all your resources are. My social media links, merchandise links. You'll find links to the guests' websites, their books, if they've written books, etc., etc., etc. And there we are. I'll bring him in now. Good evening, Paul. How are you today?
I'm very tired, so forgive me if I look like I'm dead on my feet. I got back from the Chalk History Festival yesterday and diving straight from one history world into another. So thanks very much for letting me come on.
Thank you. And for purpose of clarification, I'll be Woody tonight and you can be Paul, because otherwise it'll be really confusing. So, you know, we had the same kind of similar chat with Alex Churchill a few weeks ago. And the thing is, there's so many ways of measuring what is a historian or how people label themselves. So you do all sorts of different things because, you know, you go and do live presentations at events and different periods of history. Do you have a label you like to use in terms of, you know, a historian or something?
I would say I'd probably call myself a public historian. Definitely not an academic historian. I was told not to even take the GCSE because I would fail it. And I'm going to wear that as a badge of honor. I really am. But yeah, you know, I've studied history probably for about 25 years now. I've performed interpretations of it through the living history and reenactment scene. I've started podcasting. I started a lot of other podcasts which crashed and burned until I got to this one. But yeah, I mean, all over it's just about getting history out to the public. So if I was to label myself, probably public historian is where I'd go.
Okay, cool. And that's the thing that came up, Alex, and there's obviously a big discussion today, is that the means of sharing history with people have never been broader and wider, and the mediums used are just vast. You know, whereas back in the day, if you wanted to get access to history, there was conventional history programs on TV, you know, with whoever it would be back in the day, Michael Wood, or there were Michael Palin's travel logs and things like that. And then there were libraries and books. And now, you know, video games, podcasts, YouTube channels, festivals, literary festivals, active reenactment has been around for a few decades now. That's moved into the educational area as well. Then there's people going to schools, comic books, graphic novels. I mean, the list goes on of how people get their history. So as you kind of do your different fields of history, so the podcasting and then speaking to people as you were at Chalk Valley this week, is there kind of a standard kind of demographic of the age groups about how people access their history? Is it as simple as older people read books, younger people watch TikTok? Is it that simple, or do you think it's more complicated than that?
I don't know. I would probably say that in the podcast demographic, it is quite an older demographic. And I say that as a 50-year-old man. So it's sort of that 30 to sort of 75 kind of age bracket are the bulk of at least my podcast listeners. Although if you talk to somebody like Rest is History, you find that they've got quite a young demographic.
Yeah.
And I find that people with jobs, because a lot of people are going to listen to history podcasts when they're on their commute to work.
Yeah.
And things like that. Or I know I've got one listener who basically mainlines it all while he's doing his gardening. Another one who is actually a self-employed gardener who mainlines that all while he's doing other people's gardening. So that in terms of actually attending the shows, then that is a widespread, because they always go on at places where people are having a day out, whether it be the Chalk History Festival, whether it be the Gloucester History Festival, whether it be the legendary jousts in English heritage, or whether it be a heritage open day at, say, Sandwell Museum. So you are getting a lot of children interested. You are getting a lot of young people interested. You're getting a lot of young parents who are making sure that their kids are interested in history. So that kind of outdoor stuff is a very wide demographic. Podcasting somewhat narrower, but by no means exclusive. You know, I've got under 18-year-old listeners as much as I know.
I mean, that's good, because I know for my demographic here on World War II TV, according to the data I look, now obviously sometimes people are watching with their parents or they're using their dad's or mum's account, but officially I have no one under 21 watching me. I mean, it's just zero. My majority of people are my age and up. It's 50s, 60s, 70s, and like 93% male, according to the data. Obviously, again, there are sometimes partners and children and families who are watching under someone's account, and I guess traditionally maybe still kind of dad has the account on the internet. I don't know, probably not these days. But what I'm really intrigued, before we get into the History Rage, which is an amazing podcast, I've been on it once, and I may get invited back. I think we did talk about me coming back. I think.
You're coming back.
Okay, and so go and find my podcast with Paul back in the past. But it's is the outside events you do, because I follow you on social media. You'll be doing a demonstration where you're doing Victorian bare knuckle fighting, then you're doing something about 9th Parachute Battalion at Merville, and then you're going back into corpses, and you do all periods of history. But you have to find that sweet spot, like our mutual friend Stephen Wisdom doing his stuff of conveying information in an entertaining way. You have to go, okay, there's a story here, but I've got to do it in a semi-theatrical kind of quote unquote fun way. So how do you put together one of your routines? And they're what, 15 minutes, 20 minutes kind of length typically?
Sometimes about half an hour and plus.
Okay.
And I'll mostly start off by just kind of writing a load of bullet points. I'm much more a winger and an ad-libber than I am kind of a scripter or anything like that. We have an idea of the points that I want to get across, whether it's the moves that I want to take or the story that I want to get across. And then probably over the next 3 years of performing it gets refined and refined and refined and refined until we've got one that's absolutely nailed on. And once it's there, future performance is just really committed to memory. So yeah, I can cover about 500 years of history, but I can't do it. I can't do it to the same level that, say, James Holland would cover the Second World War. I know in-depth bits that I've found weird, fascinating, where I've stumbled across some interesting story or collection of interesting stories. And last week at Chalk, I did a new show on the crazy world of the Victorians, and it was just pulling together like 5 or 6 really insane things that I've discovered about the Victorians. And then I just kind of wrote that down on the basis of how, if I was describing it, how would I describe it? And from there, you get your kind of energy and you get your pace and so forth. And I'm well practiced. I've been doing amateur dramatics since I was 8. I'm now 50, so all that stage sort of stuff just comes second nature.
Yeah, that's that ability. I mean, there's the interesting thing we're talking to yourself is that there's parallels between what we've done in our careers and differences as well. I still am an occasional battlefield historian on tour guide, and that is a similar process where you start out with the history that you want to convey at a particular site, and then as you do it again and again and again, I find it's more the efficiency. You realize there's one sentence you can use where you used to use 3, but you're conveying exactly the same information. You kind of just boil it down to the essentials, and you kind of pull out the drama. I mean, it's about this conversation between us. I always think, I'm going to give you my kind of mantras of guiding, is that about any location, for example, and obviously your stuff, you're not always doing it on location. You're recreating Merville Battery, for example, in a field in Wiltshire, which is a bit different to recreating Merville Battery at Merville Battery. But my mantra was there are 3 levels of information about a site in Normandy. So the first thing is its basic strategic purpose. So Merville Battery is a gun battery that can fire at sword beat. That's the first level. The third level is who was the guy running across that minefield, throwing himself on that wire, running across there with a Sten gun, doing that. That's that personal narrative of the exciting part of it. And then the middle part, so that's 1 and 3. Number 2 is the detail. Number 2 is which airfield did they take off from? What was the wingspan of the aircraft? How many men were in the stick? What time did they meet up at the rendezvous? Who gave that? And basically, when I was guiding, I would give as little of 2 as I could get away with, concentrating on 1 and 3. So you have to establish here's why this is important. It's a gun voucher that overlooks, or can fire on Sword Beach. And then you bring it down to who those people are. And if someone wants to ask you, so what time did these aircraft take off and how many men are there in a company? You can pull that out if you need to, but that's not essential to get the story across. That was kind of my secret for being a tour guide. Yeah. Other people have other things. And I guess there's a similar thing for you, is that there's a certain amount of fact you want to get across there, but you don't want it to just become like the Paul Britannica, you're not a Wikipedia. You're not just a press a button and get a fact back. You've got to put those facts in a story.
I think I aim to get an audience reaction. So whether that be a laugh, whether that be a gasp, whether that be a moment of utter horror, that's really what it's for. Two reasons, really. Number one, if you get an emotional reaction from your audience, it sticks. And number two, it's a really good guide for a performance as to whether or not your audience is listening. And I will try and get that in wherever I can. So or sometimes when we did the Body Snatch show, we actually have audience participation, because I made it it's a grim subject, so I made it as comedic as I can. But getting a very middle class audience at Chalk to shout rule 2, always get the teeth, and they respond, and it sticks. And I've got people that are at that festival that can recite the 4 rules of the Body Snatcher to me now.
But that's cool, because the participation. People are watching this who have studied how people learn stuff. There's bound to be a learned person in the sidebar who's studied how the human brain works. Is you learn more by participation than you do by listening. If someone tells you something, you might remember it. If you participate in it, if you are part of the process, if you're doing it, you remember it more than just passively grading. So that's the thing you do. Mm-hmm. Outside. And later on, when we turn to podcasts, the thing about podcasts is you're going into a different discipline where it's pre-recorded. There is a distance to some extent between the audience and you, because it's an upload. They're not with you in the room there. You can't see their expressions, they can't see your expressions. So like I'm moving from battlefield guiding to doing this, there are overlaps, but there are also very great differences. So obviously you enjoy going to these events, although as you said, you're very tired there. But it's a trite interviewer's question, but when you get the reactions, when you get kids coming up repeating things back to you, that they must be the moments that make it all worthwhile. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. If nothing else, I am a total audience whore. So having that happen, realizing that you made them up, realizing that you've just entertained somebody, and that you are memorable, it doesn't half boost the ego, and then that just feeds back into itself.
Yeah, we've got some questions for you, I think, particularly. We'll do some, and then we'll talk about the podcasting. So Kevin Getz is asking, so we're a horse and glider expert. He is asking, how do you find the balance of telling a story with such a wide knowledge level of the audience? So you're going to somewhere like Chalk Valley, for example, where there are people interested there in Vikings, Romans, the talks. They maybe have a narrow interest in history. Maybe they have a broad interest in history. But it's a little bit different to, for example, me, where I'm talking to primarily World War II buffs here, or people on a battlefield tour. So how do you adjust how do you think about hitting all those dynamics when you're putting together a talk or one of your routines?
Well, the honest answer is I broadly don't. I create something that I would find entertaining. And what you find with something like Chalk and the talks that you're doing is that the people that are interested in it will come and see it. So you say, we have on here, we have a lot of, and I don't think I'm being unkind here to say we have a lot of World War II war bores, and therefore, what you're saying is about World War II, you've got an audience there that's interested in World War II. Now, if I put out a talk there that is how to be a body snatcher, or the realities of the pistol duel, or one that we're working on at the moment, the complete Odyssey in 30 minutes, it is the people that will go up on the program. The people who want to see it, who are interested in that, will come to see it. Now, that could be people that are actually interested in that period of history. It could be people that have seen us before, have a relatively good idea that it's going to be fun, so they'll go and see what we're capable of. Or it's people that have a mild passing and thought, that looks interesting, I'll go and see that. So I tend not to work on the principle of how to try and hit everybody at every level. Right. Pretty entry level as a 30-minute story goes. You don't get into too much graphic detail. but just have those things of what you want your audience to think about, what you want them to learn, and then go from there. And the people that will want to see it will want to see it.
I mean, that's the good thing about, you know, a half an hour presentation is it is kind of, it's like dipping into a buffet. You know, it's not like choosing a particular restaurant. People can kind of start it and think, well, actually, that wasn't quite what I was expecting, but it's only half an hour. Whereas we've all had that thing where we've bought a 600-page book and got 50 pages and thought, actually, I don't think this is for me. I think this is not quite what I was expecting. So there's a little difference about kind of keeping it at an accessible level, because people, when you find out what people are interested in, there are obviously things that they don't know they're interested in yet. That's the thing. We know what we are interested in, but we don't know what we might be interested in the future. So that must be something that, you know, you when you're talking about body snatchers, for example, I right now don't necessarily think I have got a big interest in that, but after half an hour, I might go, yeah, actually, no, that is really interesting. And I would come up to you after and say, so what's the best book to get from this? Where do I go next? So do you get that kind of experience?
I do, yes. Yeah, I get that quite a lot, that I want to know more. And half an hour of that is just, you know, you're doing a 30-minute intro. You know, you don't have to be basic. You can throw in some details. You can throw in some examples because it backs up your credibility. But if you're making it entertaining, people will like to know more about it. Yeah,
no, it's the entertainment thing is key. So let's kind of move to the history age, because we've been talking about your event, because that's the thing where you're covering all periods and you're bringing in all types of historians. So firstly, how did the idea come about historians raging about something that gets on their nerves? Where did it strike you overnight? Were you in the bath? Were you out one day? What was the eureka moment for?
As a podcast, it started completely by accident, because I think it was Chalk about 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. Kyle and I were looking to do some video work, so we were going to get into establishing a YouTube channel and starting to do some small, like 10-minute documentaries and things like that. So we just wanted to get some practice with video and stuff like that. So I was like, what can I do? What can I do that's short? And the idea then landed on me. To be honest, ever since then, I've pinched myself that I seem to be the first person to have thought of it. And what we did is we just grabbed some speakers. For 3 minutes on camera, just said, what is the one thing that you wish everyone would just stop believing? And then we lit the blue touch paper and let them round. So we got like Olivia Smith, we got Dan Snow, did us one, Guy Walters did us one, and we have this little system there. And we thought, oh, this is great. This has got legs. And then we realised that we lived in the north and everybody in history lived in the southeast and southwest, and we weren't going to be able to do this as a video thing. So it was really kind of after the lockdown, when I'd seen the number of people that had started podcasts and the number of people that had kind of made successes of podcasts, I thought actually that would make it. We tried about 3 or 4 different podcasts before we settled on. I went out to people and I got a rather surprising amount of angry historians. I honestly didn't think I'd get past episode 15. I thought I'd run out of friends. I mean, at the time, I pretty much knew you, James Holland, and Guy,
right,
and Kyle, and that's really it. And thank you very much for starting in our first season and coming on board.
Well, it's the same with me. You know, when I started this, I literally turned to a few friends, and it got somewhere. And then your friends know other people, and suddenly your circle starts expanding. And you know, here I am 4 years later with loads of people I know, and the same with you. So you're gonna, you know, this is about encouraging other people to get into this. So what we were talking before going live, Paul, is that, you know, no one's experiences are entirely transferable to someone else's experiences. And obviously lots of things, like you said, they start in lockdown and COVID here, which was we now realize was a particular fertile area for starting these things, because people were caught with nothing else to do. But what are the definite do's and the don't do's in terms of setting up a podcast?
Well, first of all, I would say anybody can do it. And I've noticed a few of the comments that are going up there, going with people saying, oh, I could never do it. You know, my voice sounds awful to me. Like, first of all, your voice sounds awful to you, doesn't sound awful to other people.
Yeah.
Okay, because nobody else out there knows what you sound like in your head, and that is the issue there. If you put yourself on a podcast, what you sound like to everybody is the same as what you sound like when you're talking to people. So if you are prepared to talk to people, then you can do podcasting, because all of that stuff where our voice sounds different when it's recorded and played back to us, that's because we don't have the bone conduction in there that's messing around with that. So you're going to go out there and you're going to record that and you put it out there. You're going to sound like you're going to sound to absolutely everybody else. So if you have friends, if you have a social circle, your voice is fine. That would probably say that, probably where I would start off there. And if there's people out there that are thinking of starting a podcast, then Paul's rule 1, JFDI, just fucking do it. Because to paraphrase a piece of advice that I got from Dan Jones, was you can't edit that which you haven't recorded. He actually said you can't edit the book you haven't written, but it's the same principle. You know, there is absolutely nothing to stop you. And I'm not a naturally confident person. I am somewhat of an audience hawk. It's a little bit of a kind of secret identity. But when I first started this, I was very much that. I can't stand the idea of my voice being recorded. I do not like listening to my own voice. I enjoy inflicting it on other people, but not on me. And so I recorded some things, and I recorded a few episodes of the original podcast plan we had, which was The Letter of the Law, the Ages of Historic Crime. And I played it back. And after about 3, it didn't bother me anymore. You know, because A, I've got used to it, but B, also I can control if it goes out. If I really don't like it, I don't have to release it. Don't have to upload it. You know, I've had the odd episode of History Rage that I've not published. So I just thought, that was fucking awful. And as such, it's gone no further. So you're only going to put it out there when you're happy with that. Don't let it stop you. And even if you have that idea in your head, do it. Because you don't have to put it out there. And when you do put it out there, you'll be surprised at the number of people that agree with you.
Yeah. No, I concur. And I think I'd like to add the fact that actually, despite the fact that any YouTube channel or podcast, you have to deal with the idiots in the comments afterwards, leaving you nasty stuff and sending you nasty, you shouldn't be doing this. The vast majority, 95% of people are willing you to succeed. They're wanting to learn more. They want to engage. They give people a chance. They understand that you have to start somewhere. You understand that developing hosting skills, developing podcasting skills, you're not born with it. And I think most people just want to engage, and they're happy to give a new pod a chance, providing it's got some kind of honest intention behind it.
And you'll find as well that if your podcast is awful, people generally don't take the time to tell you in an abusive way.
Yeah.
That you'll start to get comments like, oh, that person's sound quality is awful, or I signed into this and I was actually quite bored by 45 minutes and I checked out. And yeah, you're going to get that. If you write a book, you're going to get a shitty review. Somebody is not going to like it. And read that. Pull out of it what you can learn from it. Move on.
Yeah. And and I always get asked, have a vision. Do what you want to do first. Don't try and be what you think someone else is having success as. That the best musical bands, the best actors are not trying to be someone else. They're trying to take from other people and build a new version. Beatles took a bit from, American rock and roll, a bit from British folk, a little bit from this, and they created their own thing. So they weren't trying to be someone else. And I think the same with podcasters and YouTubers. You get, well, I want to be the new, rest is history. I want to be the new WW2 TV. And no, don't be the new. Be something else. Be whatever it is you want to be, and find your voice and accept the fact that There's an audience out there for everything. The question is, how big is the audience? That's the unknowing. Is that theoretically that there's no upper limit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to start with that, 2 or 3 people downloading something, and you're going, oh, that's not very many, but it's 2 or 3. It's a start.
Honestly, when I launched the first episode of History Rage, my 7-day had 16 downloads. And I get £12,500 a month. It was 16 at the start. Okay. It will grow, but it won't grow if you don't start it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, you've got some slides and stuff you prepared. We'll bring them up, and you can take us through some of the things. And because it's not just this kind of inspirational advice, you've actually got some sort of solid practical advice about how to do it. And I'm assuming, like me with this, is that you've made some false investments and started things that haven't been the right way, and then worked out what the best things are. So take us through some of the Paul History Rage lessons you've learned.
So really, as I said, if you want to get going on this, then start. But there is a few things that you need to do and need to think about kind of before you do. Now, you mentioned earlier, be yourself, and you're absolutely right. Be yourself, but don't be afraid of niche. Okay, and just because somebody else is doing the thing that you're thinking about, don't let it stop you, because you're going to be doing it in a different way. You're going to be doing it with different facts. Some people do things as a kind of co-host conversational. Some people do solo. So if you're, I'll use an example of where, one of our most recent podcasts to the scene, which is Nevermind the Dam Busters. Okay. Really like it. Okay. RAF Bomber Command podcast. Jane said, well, there isn't an RAF Bomber Command podcast, so there should be. So she started one. Now, anybody else sitting there thinking, okay, well, RAF Bomber Command is now dealt with as a podcast, I can't do that anymore. Well, that's just not true. After all, how many books on the Battle of Stalingrad are there? Yeah. Everybody's got something to bring. But in terms of the basics of podcasting, okay, if you take no other rule of podcasting away from this, I want you to really hammer home this, which is your sound quality is more important than your content. Okay, if your content can be great, and I've seen podcasts where it is, and the sound quality is killing it, where I can't even listen to it, and I'm prepared to give most podcasters a chance. So, what I've built within this talk then is kind of how to look at getting that up to a level. Because if your content's great, your sound quality shit, you're wasting your time. Okay, because it'll just get absolutely infuriating. So, before I kick into the recording software that's up on the side here, half decent microphone. Okay, you can pick them up for about 65 quid. Is your cheapest one, and then you can expand up. So you can start with something. I think it's like Samsung QU12. I think it is. I kind of skipped that level, but that's like the basic level. You go onto any podcasting forum and say, "What's a good beginner mic?" That will come up. I started out with the Blue Yeti, which is the one that James was originally using when he started We Have Ways, and it's not bad. It'll do you. It costs about 100 quid, and then I've upgraded to this, which is a Rode Pod mic. That was about £250, but you don't have to go that advanced that early on. Okay, Blue Yeti sorted.
I've got Blue Yeti. I bring mine. There's mine coming in there. Has it above my head? That's what I use.
Yeah, never did me any problems at all. You can go cheaper, and there's no problem with doing that. But for the love of God, don't be using like laptop mics, phone mics, the mic in your gamer headset and things like that. It's not cut out for this. So do actually spend the money to get an actual dedicated microphone for it, and wired headphones as well. Wireless headphones seem like a good idea, but actually what you'll find is there is about a half-second delay between it being said and it hearing. And if you've got an echo, that's going to appear half a second behind, and it's almost impossible to edit out after the event. There are things that you can do to deal with it beforehand. So get yourself a decent mic, and then you're onto recording software. Now, there's really people do 3 different styles of podcast in the history world. You've either got your solo performer, your storyteller, Okay, somebody like the Dark Histories podcast, or somebody like Ye Old Crime, for example. And what they're doing is they're going through, a lot of true crime podcasts do this as well, is that they're going through and they're basically just telling you the story and giving you the facts. And it's almost like a little bit of a lecture. And then you've got what I would call the conversational podcast, which good examples of that would be Rest is History, would be We Have Ways on certain episodes, where you've got two people talking about a thing. Again, hat tip, never mind the Dam Busters. This is a good one on that. And then you've got guest and interview podcasts like mine, where I will get on a different guest kind of every week, and I will be talking to them. But the principles of it all are the same. When it comes to recording software, you're looking at what do you use? Well, I've given 4 options here, and they go kind of in quality from the bottom left anti-clockwise, almost anti-clockwise round. So you can start with Zoom. A lot of people start with Zoom. It's pretty decent. If you want to do it for more than 40 minutes, then you're going to have to spend money on it. And at that point, it's still not going to record in 2 separate channels. Now, if you're a guest hosting podcast, you want it recording in 2 separate channels, because then if somebody coughs or sneezes, you can edit that out. And what's on their side is not going to appear on what's your side. And so it's going to make it a lot easier for you when it comes to editing. So Zoom you can use, but it's not going to record in separate channels without you paying more money than some other providers will do. Zencaster was where I started. I have to say I haven't been back to Zencaster for about 2.5 years now, because they had some stability issues. They are also audio only, but you can get away with doing free with that if you don't want to spend the money. We'll record in separate channels. There's nothing wrong with Zencaster, but I just found that it got problems holding its internet stability. Our early episode with Alina suffered from that one, and it was a nightmare to join all the sound together and then move on from there. The one I've done most with is Squadcast. Squadcast cost me about $12 a month. Has some really neat little things in it, like echo cancellation. So I was saying earlier, if you've got that half-second echo, particularly on interview-style podcasts, you can't control what your guest is equipped with. So sometimes you're going to find that their tech is creating you a problem. Quick click on echo cancellation and it gets rid of that. Or if you've got a guest that is not going to use headphones, that doesn't like to use headphones, and they're a pretty big name and you don't want to argue with them about it, then what echo cancellation does is it cuts out what's coming out of their speakers.
Yep.
And it's an absolute godsend. There are problems with echo cancellation, but that is that if you've got 2 people talking at once, what it'll do is it'll prioritize the host. So at some point you might have somebody who's making a point, you try and interrupt with a question, it doesn't work out, but you want to take that out later. You would find with echo cancellation on that it's kind of destroyed the end of that. That can be a problem, but it is worth it really to save yourself the headache of editing future things. And then you've got Riverside, which is where I am now. Good for video podcasting, does a lot of your noise reduction for you. Again, has the echo cancellation feature in it. Will actually take your video, try and pick out the 5 best bits of it, and put them, separate them out into 1-minute social media clips if you want to put them on TikTok as well. So a lot of good stuff. It's got a really terrifying thing that can be done in editing as well, which is that it'll come up with a transcript. If you bollocks the date up, let's just say Paul here has gone, 6th of June, 1943, Normandy was invaded, and he really doesn't want that going out live because it'll ruin his credibility. You can actually alter the date in the transcript, and it will use AI to memorize your voice and edit that word back in.
Well, that's a bit scary.
The even more terrifying bit as well is it'll lip sync the video for you. I just daren't use that. But those are your recording softwares, and even if you're doing a solo podcast, I would say it is worth putting the money aside to do decent recording software. You can record it directly into your editing software, and I'll talk about that when I get into editing. But you'll find that certainly Squadcast and Riverside do quite a lot of your kind of sound control for you. which can be really useful, particularly if you're a beginner, has no idea what a graphic equalizer does. Those will help you a lot.
No, definitely. And this is where there's a difference, a quite distinct difference in what I'm doing here on YouTube and what you're doing as a podcast, because I'm live, the tolerance of audio is different, and because we've got visuals as well, and a lot of people are watching this not on headphones, they are watching it on the TV or they're watching on a monitor, whereas podcasts you tend to be listening to it on your iBuds, or you're jogging, you're on the train and stuff. So as you said earlier, it's all about the audio, because you're not compensating for with some nice images and some nice, so it's there's similarities between what we do, and there's differences as well. And obviously I'm live now, and we can't put my audio or your audio for anything to boost it, which I know you're going to be talking about in a minute, because there's the recording, then there's the playing around with the file afterwards, which we can talk about.
Yeah, so that was recording in a nutshell. And then, but let's say, yeah, worth shelling out for the recording software.
Yeah.
If I go into next, then hosting. So those of you that have recorded something and feel I am going to get it out there, okay, then you're going to need to go and do a host. Now, there's methods of doing this, and most of it costs money. However, there are a few sort of nice cheap ways, and your hosting is not going to cost you a fortune. I mean, I'm at the top end with like Acast Pro. It cost me about $18 a month. I think I just renewed for a year. I think it cost me $288 a year. Acast pretty much does everything, but it's not where I'd recommend people begin, even though you can actually host on Acast for free. But the thing is, if you're not doing, if you're a beginner and you're finding your theme, Acast customer service isn't that great. So a lot of the problems that may come up with hosting, distribution, that sort of thing, fine, is you need to be able to deal with those yourselves. Whereas a lower down one like Podbean and Buzzsprout, they have really, really good customer service. So if you are stuck on something, if something's going wrong, you really don't know how to work that problem out, you will learn, okay, but they will pull out all the stops to keep you going in the first place. Acast kind of expects you to know what you're doing. And therefore, if you're going in on their free section, it can host for free, it'll distribute for free. But yeah, you do need to know what you're doing. Where I started out was Buzzsprout, and that was recommended to me by Ian of Cold War Conversations. And what it does is you can do a free version. The free version of that isn't that great. Free version of Podbean is better. But I found that the paid version of Buzzsprout was, again, it was about $8 to $10 a month. And what that did is, it's, first of all, it circulated. So it puts you on Apple, it puts you on Spotify, puts you on Audible, and it puts you on all the smaller podcast providers like Pocket Casts and Overcast and Deezer and other. There really are an awful lot of like tiny podcast providers that have their own loyal followings, and that people. We've all got that one app we're obsessed with. Podcasters are no different. Okay, and what they'll do is they'll make sure you're on all of them. So they've got guides to where they can do it automatically. There'll be some that don't do automatic submissions. Buzzsprout's got really, really good guides as to how you get on them. So in terms of distribution, Buzzsprout is a much better starting place than Acast. I don't have a huge amount of experience with Podbean, but certainly they've got some pretty big hosts on them as well at that level. History Hack was on Podbean. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know if they're still there. I believe Zach at Napoleonic Wars podcast, he transferred from Anchor to Spotify and has had a nightmare. Okay, because Anchor got bought out by Spotify. So I would probably say, again, as a beginner, and stay away from Spotify for podcasts. They're going to expect you to know what you're doing. Okay, so couldn't recommend Buzzsprout highly enough. What you'll do is you'll reach a point where you're recording with them, and you're uploading with them up to a level. They give you a finite amount. So I think at the initial level, I was once a fortnight. It was 3 hours a month recording that they'll allow you to upload. I was making that, but the moment that I wanted to go weekly, I needed to go to the next level up, which is about $18 a month. And that's when I made the jump to Acast, because I knew what I was doing at that point, and similar level with Acast was about $15 a month. So it worked out cheaper, but as a beginner one, I can't rate Buzzsprout highly enough.
Cool.
You do definitely need a host. That is going to be one thing that you will need. And then the one that everybody has the dread of, the editing. Okay. Basically, and the Bev. Okay. The one I use is Audacity. It's free to download. I've got the download in the comments below, and it will. That's where you can start kind of like cutting bits out, silencing bits out. Looks very technical. The reason I use Audacity is really thorough, really, really thorough. There are a few things you can't do with Audacity, and even I only use about 10% of it.
Yeah.
GarageBand has got two flaws, in my opinion, and it is just my opinion. Number one, it's pretty much geared up for Apple users. Okay, so if you're using on a PC, you're not the concern that GarageBand really want. They set up for our Apple Macs in mind. And secondly, GarageBand is geared towards music.
Yeah.
It's geared towards music software, whereas Audacity very much suits spoken word. And for podcasts, that's exactly where you're going. So to look at what Audacity looks like, I will shock some people. But there you go. That is my download of a recent episode. As you can see, it's recorded in 2 channels. And so we've got guest speaking here. You've got me interrupting there. And what I do really is I just go through it, and then I'll play it through. And when somebody's done something that I don't want in anymore, you know, they've got a date wrong, or they've just said, right, I want to do that bit again, and so forth. You just go out, you highlight the area, right, drag along, and then you can literally just cut the whole thing out. And it's pretty seamless. It's got some really good tools for getting rid of background noise as well. I've got computers on in my background, which my microphone will pick up. All I do, and as Paul will testify, I record 15 seconds of everybody's background noise at the start. Gives me the noise pattern. Literally just pull down the menu and go remove noise, and it's gone and it's out.
Yep.
There are a few more other wild and wonderful settings on it, which anybody who's interested and anybody who's got a podcast, just get in touch. You know, I'm more than happy to advise on the various settings that I'll use within Audacity and where I go from there. But
you can do all the kind of, and I use Adobe Premiere Pro when I occasionally do anything where I edit anything. I use that, which has fairly good audio settings, and you can boost voices and reduce voice, change pitch and things. I mean, I don't do most of that stuff, but there are all sorts of things you can do if you want to really improve the quality of a particular voice and adjust the levels and stuff. And yeah, all good solid advice, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. And then to add to that, really, I've got cheats. And I use a lot of these when I'm doing festival episodes. But honestly, I should be on commission for Auphonic because I'm building a shrine to Auphonic. But these are 2 that I've highlighted that do some rather cute little things. Namely, Descript is another one with what it'll do is it'll take out all your filler words. I guarantee you, doing interviews, you are going to get people for whom the word is every 3rd word that they do. And you can kind of get away with it on YouTube because you've got that live experience. Everybody knows it's a bit live, it's a bit raw. Yeah. You don't really get that luxury with podcasts. People are listening to it in their own time when they want to kick back and relax, and they don't want that sort of stuff going on. So that has a limited option to remove them. Auphonic has a much better option, and while it's at it, it'll balance all your sound for you. It will make sure that everybody's talking at the same volume. It will it gets rid of silences, it gets rid of breath noises. That's a really big one for podcasters, really big one. And it will let you upload 5 hours worth of footage, for want of a better word, per month. You upload your file, you run it through, you download it again, and it's done a whole load of your episodes for you. And this is why when I go and do a festival special, I recently did one with Peter Caddick Adams at Chalk, and you can imagine what the background noise of Chalk Valley is like.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're about 10 yards away from the blacksmiths. going on in the background. I ran that through Orphonic with a few little sort of tweaks and used a lot of their AI stuff to do it. Nothing complicated. I just selected some menu options, ran it through, it eliminated all that. And if you look at the screen for Orphonic, as you can see in the bottom here, if you can zoom that in, that there is the original track at the bottom. Okay, as you can see, it's wildly different sounds and things like that. Top track there is the edited one, and as you can see, it balances all that volume out for you. This is a real pain in the ass for a lot of podcasters, is just trying to get those volume levels right and trying to get rid of the background noise. Orphonic will do it for you. They'll let you do 5 hours for free. Because I'm doing a fair few episodes, I do extra episodes now, and I'm doing book launch specials. I've got up to the level where I've paid for it as well. But I've been using Orphonic for free for about 2 years. I think, sorry, I made a crippling mistake there. I'll let you do 2 hours for free.
Right.
But that was enough, you know. I'm that far ahead that I can run them through. But I've now started paying for it, and it's absolutely well worth it. Because if you, like me, got no idea what a graphic equalizer actually does, that will take care of it for you.
Trevor is asking which is the best one for wind reduction, and that's wind reduction is really complicated. There's various. It all depends on the quality of the recording, but there are options, aren't there, for wind?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at recording just voice, okay, you've got no tunes in the background or anything like that, I would go with Orphonic, and I'm assuming that only like wind recording on location. If you're doing it video, then what I'd do is upload your entire sound file, run it through Orphonic to get rid of the background noise, and just select the keep voice setting.
Yeah.
And then pull it back down and then feed it back into your video and just synchronize it up. If you're doing audio only as a podcast, then definitely Orphonic, because it's trained to listen out for voice and keep voice in. So during that one that I recorded with Peter, in the background, unpredictably, Tudor music started kicking up in the background. And because there's an option on there where it can eliminate music and keep voice, and it did it beautifully. Like I say, I should be on commission for these guys. I can't recommend them highly enough. Anything on?
We'll do some questions later on. Let's go through some more equipment, then we'll do some general questions about podcasts and stuff later on.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of equipment, if you've got your microphone, you've got your wired headphones, you've got a host, you've got some editing software, then you are good to go. The next thing I was going to talk about really was monetizing, which is not at the start. It took me about a year and a half before I got anything approaching money for it. I set up Patreon at the start 2 years ago. I think I went 5 months before I got my first Patreon subscriber, and even that Patreon subscriber was Kyle. And it was August.
Yeah, your co-host. Yeah, okay, yeah. Does that count? Yeah.
Well, he did say that, you know, he recognised that I was spending all the money and buying all the equipment, so he figured that he would put £5 in, and it was his way of contributing. And since he's kind of stepped back from there, he's carried on, which I'm very grateful for. Either that, or he's just forgotten that he still pays me £5 a month. Patreon is probably where about 50% of my income comes from. Acast adverts is the other. Adverts, they are a bit of a bane to podcast listeners, but most podcast listeners will grudgingly accept that you deserve some money for doing this, and if they're not prepared to pay it themselves, they will put up with the adverts. Most podcast apps allow you to kind of skip 15 seconds on, so most people who don't want to listen to them will just go ahead and listen to them, which is a luxury you don't get on YouTube.
No, not really. No, I mean, I know later on I want to talk about, because I meet people who say, I'm thinking of doing a podcast or a YouTube channel. And I'm going, well, they're very different. There's a big similarity in that if you want to talk about, I don't know, the mating habits of African tree frogs, you can do that on each platform, but how they function is very different. People have been saying in a sidebar, what I lose in that right now, this sentence coming out of my head now I've not thought of the end of it before I started it, and I'm now thinking that I should have, if I was editing it, I would start this whole sentence again, right? But I'm halfway through it now, so I've got to find a solution to it. I've got to bring this sentence in now. But people like that on a live show. They like the fact that it is live. They like to feel, I got it in the last show I did, that the dynamic they like on WW2TV is that kind of being down a pub with people. Whereas a podcast is slightly different. A podcast, some people are looking for something, as you said earlier, Paul, a little bit more slick, a little bit more finished. It's a production. It's the album as opposed to the live playing of the album. So I think if you're watching this, folks, and you're thinking of doing a YouTube channel or a podcast, be really clear about what is involved. And of course, within YouTubing, you can have uploaded stuff that's finished and slick, or you can do stuff live. So there are multiple branches of direct forks in the road in terms of decisions that you have to make. And I'm sure you agree with that, Paul, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there is an overlap. You know, you can do video podcast on YouTube. Classic example, Scandalmongers, Andrew Lowney and Phil Craig. You know, that is a video podcast done over YouTube. Then you've got your live streaming. You've got all the way up to short and long documentary making that's on there as well. But again, our base will find the same: is your audience will find you.
Yeah.
You know, you let them know you're there, and your audience will pick up from that. And before we get into that, so I thought, looking at the time on, I've got kind of a top 10 do's and don'ts, really, that I will throw into this, and I'll kind of go through that.
Let's do that
a little bit quickly, because these are kind of like the takeaway messages for any podcast, and I'm more happy to kind of open up to questions. So here we go. Care about your audience.
Coming at number 10. Care about your audience, folks.
Thank you for that, Paul. That came at me from that.
I'm in a funny mood. I had a pint of beer at my lunch, so I'm going into full Alan Fluff Freeman mode now. I'm smashy to your nicey.
All right, I'm not that nice. You've met me, you know. It's the care about your audience. I've actually been on 4 other podcasts now where the host has gone, oh, you know what, I like the idea of 2 people chatting in a pub. I don't really edit it. It goes in as it stands. And with a podcast, like, if you're going to say to me, I can't be bothered to edit, you don't care what your audience thinks. And yeah, you can be you, okay, and you can go and you think my contact's great and I'm going to get my message out there. But a podcast is reliant on its listeners. Okay, if nobody's listening, all you're doing is talking into a microphone. So you have to go out with surveys and things like that to find out what your audience will want. They will work that out for themselves. But honestly, they do want to feel like they're worth the effort. And therefore, it goes back again when like your sound quality is more important than your content, because when it isn't, your audience feel that you don't care. Okay, I've listened to podcasts that have got echoes in them, driving me up the wall. I'm listening to podcasts where I can hear the person making pencil notes as they're going through. It's like, you need to go rid of that. You need to have better noise control, because in that, I'm feeling you don't care about my listener experience. And listener experience is the most important thing now. So definitely do care on that one. Don't quit. And as a YouTuber, Paul will be absolutely bang on behind this. Okay, it is a marathon, not a sprint. Success does not lie in the content you are putting out this week. Success lies in the massive back catalogue you are building up.
And be inspired by those ahead of you, not put off by it. Look, yeah. I say to people, look down, look at where you've been and where you are now. Don't keep looking ahead. There's always a bigger fish in the sea. There's always someone out there who's started more recently, who's gone to massive, great success, and they're being, watched on it. Don't be put off by that. Just, stick with your vision. We're all on the ladder somewhere.
Yeah, and those guys ahead of you, a lot of them are going to give up. Yeah. Okay. There are over 4.5 million podcasts in the world. if you can get yourself to 10 episodes and keep going, you are in the top 10% of podcasts in the world. 90% of those podcasts are not creating new content. They are just there. You keep going. And then as we all are, slaves to our download figures, you look, and every so often you will get that person that's gone, I liked that, I will download the rest of them. Now, that won't be a big impact when you've only got 4 episodes. When you've got 150 episodes, well, that is where your success is going to lie. I currently, as I mentioned earlier, about 12,500 downloads per month. Probably only 30% of that is episodes that I put out in that month. The rest is people going back and listening to others. People like to mainline podcasts. So the more that you've got for them to go to, the more that they will. Okay. I've got a guy, shout out to you, Anthony, but quite clearly from the comments that he leaves, has become a Patreon subscriber and has gone back to the start and is working his way through and has not caught up yet. And that is where your success is going to lie. So for the love of God, don't quit.
Yep.
Spend money when you have it. It is worth it. I'll come through the amount of money that you spend, but if you go for all the free options and stick at that, okay, you're gonna have a free podcast. Okay, and it's gonna be at that level. You do get what you pay for in podcasting, whether it be better microphones, better hosts, better marketing techniques and things like that, better promoters. So don't be afraid to spend it when you've got it. But what I would say is assign yourself a budget that you can afford.
Yep.
And I will come back and then go for spending that. Like, can I afford it? Yeah, I'm going to do it. If I look at that and go, I know that's more money than I'm willing to spend at this time, I don't have that question in my head of should I just go that extra mile. It's like, no, I can't afford it right now. The day will come when you can. Yep. And then you do it then. Never shut up about your podcast. Honestly, I try to get myself on everybody else's, but I'm constantly banging on about it. Whether it be in terms of social media, you'll see I put a number of posts out, I put a quote out from the episode per day, and so forth. Bang on about it absolutely all the time. People forget when they're doing something audio, particularly when they're doing something online, there is a whole offline world out there that still listens. It's on its phones. It's not looking at Twitter. It's subscribing to Apple Podcasts. So the more you tell people, the better you're going to do. Now, this is a big one. This is always improve your editing. And this is not, I'm saying always go out to get better and that whole like business idea if you should be 1% better than you did before. But the thing is, you are naturally just going to get better at editing. And I'm a big believer in go back and re-edit your old episodes when you've got time to do so. And for younger podcasts, this can be actually an easy thing to do because when you've only got 6 or 7 episodes out, and worked out what you're doing, go back and do it on the rest of them. I've now got 150. It's a troll. But the reason that I mention all this is that you're going to get that listener that listens to episode 140 and goes, I liked that. I came along looking for Peter Caddick Adams. He was very well received. I enjoyed it. I'm going to go back and listen to what this guy has to offer. And what they do then is they go back to episode 1, which is the worst editing you've ever done in your career, and start there from the back. And it's a drain. It's not going to cost you listeners, but if they're trying to work their way through your back catalogue and your sound quality is a marked decrease on where it was before, they probably won't stop listening to you, but they'll probably stop listening to your old episodes. And you want that guy that's going through and catching up and listening to all 150. So wherever you've got the time to do so, if you've got new editing techniques that you've done that will help your old episodes, go back and do them again. I try and revamp at least 2 episodes a month as a result.
It's interesting because I don't disagree with you, but my counterpoint is I look at some of my early World War II TV episodes And they're, I mean, I'm dreadful. The quality is dreadful. My camera seemed to be like 16 mega, just awful bits. I'm all blurry and washed out and stuff and blah, 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 blah. But I also think it goes back to your point about you're caring about your audience. If someone watches one of my old episodes out of the blue, and then they go, "Cool, he was a bit shit back then," but they'll also see that in the 3 years, 4 years since then, I've made attempts to improve it. I've got better. My background is better. My microphone is better, and I think they'll if your new ones were just as crap as the old ones, that's really off-putting. But I think if people can see a marked improvement, I think they're improving their trust of you. So, no, this guy cares. Look at where he was. His enthusiasm was there at the beginning, but now he's doing exactly the same thing, but it's more slick. So I don't think having some earlier episodes being low quality actually necessarily is a long-term damage. I think it shows honesty.
No, you're right. And it's not long-term. And like I say, it's not going to rob you of listeners. Yeah. But what you're going to find is if you've got somebody who's listened to episode 140, they go, right, I'm going to start episode 1, and then they're going to go 1, 2, 3. This is I'll stay loyal. I'm going to listen to episode 141, but they're not going to listen to episodes number 4 to 139 in between time. They'll stay with you because they recognise that you've improved, but they might not want to sit through all your earlier stuff. However, it's just building in those kind of extra downloads. Don't make it a priority, but when you've got time,
that makes sense. Yeah.
Don't have in jokes. Now this is where I
controversial.
Yes, controversial one. I'm looking at We Have Ways here. Okay,
that came straight into my head as you said that.
And the thing is, you can have in jokes when you've got the following that We Have Ways has got. We Have Ways has a community. Possibly, if you listen to the last one, they would even admit it's a cult. I think Almori said on the last episode, we're a cult, we just don't expect you to sleep with us. And you can have a lot of those in jokes and things like that when you've got 3,500 Patreon subscribers. When half your audience is coming to Buckinghamshire to see you in person. Okay, when you've got 100 listeners, your in jokes are pretty much excluding everybody new that's coming in. Okay, and as a beginning starting podcast, you can be really tempted to go, I'm going to be like that. We're going to have this thing and we're going to build that community. And it's no bad idea, but actually what it's doing is you're getting a listener that's coming in that's never heard your stuff before, and they're thinking, I don't get half of this. I will move on. And so to avoid it until you've got a community that you can do it with, where, if you're sitting there thinking, I'd like more listeners, but I don't need more listeners, that's the moment that you can start having in jokes with your community. Or you can set yourself up a fan Facebook page that's like, History of Buttons 1913 fan group. Have all the in jokes you like that, because that's your community. They've made a conscious choice to dive into that. On your podcast, leave it out at the start.
And that's again where I think the podcast world differs slightly from my YouTube world. Is I think new people on because you're hosting your podcast on your own with your guest, but I am hosting this in a weird way alongside my sidebar warriors there, the hardcore, the Willies and the Gwilliams and the Jays and that, who are in there, they're welcoming new viewers in. They're telling them sometimes what the jokes are and this means this. And so I think you don't want it to become simply just the rehashing of catchphrases where there's no content. It is all just in jokes. But I think for me on World War II TV, a certain amount of that, once you start to understand the in jokes, then you're feeling part of it. You're feeling part of a community. And I'm very gratified, and rather completely things I wasn't predicting was the community that was going to establish outside of me talking to people. It's the fact that some of my viewers have met up with each other socially. They have interaction in each other's lives outside of this, and that people will come on to say that they're not being on today because they're visiting their sick mother in hospital, or I can't be on today but I wanted to say hello. That is something I never I never had production meetings where I thought, here's where I see myself in 12 months' time. I didn't. It was all flying by the seat of my pants. But I'm so pleased that I've got this community that is flourishing, whether I'm here or not, in a weird kind of way. So that, again, if you're watching this and you're thinking about a YouTube channel or a podcast, there are decisions you need to make about what sort of community you want to build and what relationship. You said, Paul, you're quite correct, to have a good relationship with your listeners and your viewers. But what sort of relationship do you want to have? And do you want to interact with them? And if so, how much?
Now, having that community in that style, it kind of suits WW2 TV because you're live streaming. Yeah. And so you've got people interacting on chat. So you mentioned earlier on there that you can have the in-joke, you can have the catchphrase. People in the chat will explain what it is. On a podcast, you don't have that luxury.
True.
And that's where it will kind of turn people away. And at the start, the last thing you want to be doing is putting people off.
Yeah.
So no, it has a place. It has a different place in podcasting than it does on live streaming. And if you are live streaming a podcast, as I'm about to start doing, then that will build, from there, and there'll be a place in for it. But your overall outside listener, and this applies to podcasting. Actually, applies to podcasting more than it would apply to YouTubing. But
yeah, no, definitely. Okay, no, I'm in agreement. Yeah, super.
Okay, get on every podcast that you can. This is my number one marketing rule. I try to get on one a month. I'm technically speaking kind of on one now, but never miss an opportunity again to bang on about your podcast. And the beauty about getting on other people's podcasts as a guest, A, podcasts always want guests, and B, you are talking to a group of people that listen to podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because you can't generally find them via social media. Okay, you can go wide shotgun approach with social media, but if you can get on a podcast, you then are speaking to people who listen to podcasts, and people who listen to podcasts on average listen to 8. They have loyalty, but eventually one of their loyal ones will stop producing, and you will become their loyal one if you don't go right in at the start. Okay.
Yeah.
So
good point.
Never underestimate getting on, being a guest, anything you can, because you're going to reach some people that don't reach you. You're going to do some tiny podcasts, and I would always say on this theme, and this is why I'm very grateful to Paul, is I will always remember I was the little guy once. And therefore, if you've got a starting out podcast that you want a guest, and you've got 8 downloads in a month, I'm there. I'm talking to 8 people who listen to a podcast. Advantage of that is that probably 7 of those will never have heard of History Rage. Secondly, tiny podcast. If you want to fuck it up, nobody's going to have heard you do it. It's a good way of getting used to doing podcasts. I've been a guest on a Czech language tutorial that wanted me there so that people could practice listening to English. I went on that and banged on about my podcast. I've been all the way up to Eleanor Yarniger's channel on medieval history and everything in between. And if you've got something to talk about, it gives you an opportunity to bang on about your podcast again. So
and it allows your skills to improve. You're talking to different people because everybody has a slightly different way of recording and hosting and how long they talk for and how they, I learn things from how other people put questions and that's a really good way of putting that. And that, learning how to listen is important as well. So yeah, you can't do enough. I've just got one. I just said yes to one today. A movie review podcast. So completely not a history specialist, but they want me to do something for Ryan. So fine, I can do that. Have a bit of a rant about it.
I went on Review It Yourself covering Titanic. And again, he's got me back on to do nothing, not history related, but he's doing a Jaws month. Wow. So I wrote almost a dissertation on that franchise. So I'm going to go back and do 4 episodes on the Jaws franchise.
Fantastic.
Every time you're getting a mention, every time you're getting a different style of interviewer with every different podcast that you go on, and it just builds your skills. Okay. Don't be afraid to interrupt a guest. this is where I get my best stuff. Because if I can think of a question, my audience has thought of the same question.
Good point.
And so I will have my 6 questions that I'm going to ask. But sometimes I may go down a rabbit hole, just carry on going down that route. But this was I had to learn this one. It was Matt Bone from the Dancasters podcast that said to me, don't be afraid to interrupt a guest because you're going to get your best stuff from there.
Yeah, good point.
Get organised. There is a shit ton of work in this. I kid you not. I mean, you book a guest if you're a guest one, or at least run through your content if you're a solo or co-host conversational. But then you've got to record it. You've got to edit it. You've got to upload it. You've got to write the show notes for it. You've got to put the keywords in. You've got to be a decent, catchy title. And then if you're going down the route that I do, you've got audiograms, okay, and all those promotional things, the quote images that I put together. Have I got the mug that I've done for the History Rage up when the episode is out, and so forth? Are you writing blog articles, news articles? There is a lot of work to this, and you have to be an absolute workaholic. Very much like Alex in her last one, you know, when she's going to her own birthday party and is at 11:30 at night finishing off an email. You know, it's not a hobby, it's a lifestyle choice.
Yep.
There is a lot. You can streamline it. You have to get really organized to do so. And you will be swamped at the start and you will just get better at it. But yeah, get organized. And then my last, don't do or spend more than you can. Now, I don't know who asked the question, but good question. There's somebody said, should it go weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, fortnightly, so forth. Okay.
There we are. And I brought it up immediately because I had it saved.
There we go. Alt92, really good question. Okay. So start out with what you are capable of. Okay. So if you feel that you've got the time to do it weekly, go for it. Okay. If you think, I don't know if I'm going to have the time, do it fortnightly. I did it fortnightly at the start. And then after about 6 months, I bumped up to weekly because I found I was really enjoying it. And also I was getting massively ahead with guests. Okay, so I started then I'd streamline my organization, got it in there and got it going to weekly. I'm now, bear in mind the amount of specials that I do and things like that, I'm almost at twice a week as an average over a year.
Right.
Because I will do an episode a day for the Chalk Festival. I'll do an episode a day for the Gloucester History Festival. I'll do a Titanic special because I just love Titanic. I'll do a Christmas special. So I'm up to 100 episodes a year on average. I'm doing book launch specials once a month, okay, and go for it. But basically, if you overwork yourself, then you will find that if you have to drop, for example, from weekly to fortnightly, that's something you want to avoid. So I'd say
although it's not, I mean, again, I'm talking about my YouTube experience compared to your podcast experience. And one of the things I was told really early on is if you start doing 5 things a week, don't drop to 3 things a week, and definitely don't go for like 2 weeks without doing anything at all, because people will leave you in droves. And I used to really panic about that. And I think for my first couple of years, I didn't have any time off, and it was COVID. I wasn't going anywhere. But now I'm completely confident to not do anything for 10 days when I'm doing one of my tours, for example. And I say, okay, there's been no content going up. And you get to a certain point, it doesn't affect things. People will just go. In fact, I think it gives people an opportunity to go back and find your back catalogue. So there'll be people watching this, and we'll bring up some of their comments and questions a bit later on, is that are maybe thinking, reading this stuff that's online saying, if you start doing a show a month, do not stop, or you will die if you stop. Don't believe that. If you have to stop for a reason, if you've got problems with your mental health, your day job, your marriage, your work, whatever, the world isn't going to end because your viewers or listeners don't have a podcast coming out on a Thursday. So folks, my advice is please don't end up feeling committed to something. It's got to be something that you enjoy. It's got to be something that isn't, the pressure can't get to you. And I'm assuming you'll agree with me on some level there, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, this comes into the kind of like the don't do more than you can, really.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in that situation, you've gone weekly and you can't do it, okay, then it is better to drop to fortnightly than burn out. You are going to see an effect of that, but like with YouTube, consistency is pretty much key. Podcast audiences kind of like that update that comes along. In fact, my Monday release episodes, the weekly ones that I put out, generally perform better than all my festival specials. Okay, the ones that appear kind of like randomly throughout something. So if you have to drop it down, then you have to drop it down. Okay, it's not going to kill you. It's not really going to harm you hugely, but you will see a kind of like drop off in following, where people have gone, oh, that's because you're not coming up as much in sort of Apple Auto downloads and things like that. You're not appearing on people's phones. Like I say, people have about 8 podcasts, and I'll go to the next one. But don't burn yourself out.
Yep.
So, going back to Alt's question is, weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, whatever you can do is the key point of that. There are podcasts out there that are monthly. There are podcasts out there that are fortnightly. There are podcasts out there that are weekly. And then you've got Rest is History that can do 15 episodes, 1 per day straight off. Okay, do what you can do. And again, spend what you can spend. So the last thing that you want to be doing is forking out for a microphone and finding that you can't afford your hosting fee. Because when your host stops hosting you, you are gone. Okay, so always set yourself a budget, push it to that level, keep it at that level. When you're in a position where that budget can be going up, then you can put it up. If you need to go and look for a cheaper option for something, go and find that cheaper option. But don't spend more than you can, because it's very easy to get carried away with this.
Yep.
And there you go. So I will throw open for Q&A.
Yeah, well, there's quite a few things come up there, Paul. So thanks for giving us your insight there. So I'll go take them in, and some of them aren't just about podcasting; they're about the sharing of history, which is kind of the subject we're also talking about. So going back to that, the early question. Well, first, this is a bit of praise for us, saying from Kevin Soundmixer, thanks for sharing, Paul. And yes, your presentation is definitely encouraging to someone like me who's toying with the idea of starting a new YouTube channel about World War II history in the Pacific. So if we're giving people the encouragement, and Stuart was sort of about not liking his voice, to maybe dip their toe in the water, that's really good. So thanks for that. Peter O'Connell is asking about this is kind of your work out at the events, the live events, but also with the History Rage podcast you do. I'll just put that one. So, given the flaws in historical documentaries that have aired for decades, e.g., the M4 medium Sherman tank was a piece of junk, how do you disabuse people of what incorrect facts they firmly believe are true? Well, that's kind of in the area you tackle on your podcast, isn't it? Is that people, your guests, kind of rage about the things they wish would go away. So, I mean, having spoken to all these historians about the things that aggrieve them and piss them off, do you have a kind of a set answers what we can do about these entrenched myths?
We generally kind of spell it out. So if it comes to me on a live event, for example, bear in mind, my podcast, I very rarely get to get my own rages out. I have to go on other people's for that. But when it comes to a live event, we have this kind of unofficial tagline, which is, well, when you look at it like that, and you kind of explained it in a way that's made them think about it a little beyond the myth. So Alex Churchill did it spectacularly on the podcast herself when she did the episode on lion. Well, to quote, "Lions led by donkeys can just fuck off."
Yeah.
How Alex do you get? And she said, well, you don't get to director level in your chosen profession in the most dangerous environment the world had seen up to press by being a complete moron. And it's like, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it. Another one, Chris Kempsell, when he came on to do the French are not cheese eating surrender monkeys. He basically opened up with, well, if the French are all surrender monkeys that lose all their wars, we should start by not offering any credit to Waterloo or Trafalgar. And it's always that kind of thing of give those people the opportunity, not just tell them that they're wrong. It's like give them the opportunity to
give them a mic drop response. Yeah.
You know, so it's not just kind of telling them off. We we do it in the body snatch show. You know, the big myth, and it was our first ever history, was Burke and Hare are not body snatchers, and that'll get oh, the world's most famous body snatchers, Burke and Hare. Yeah, they are, but they never actually dug up a grave. To which I'll say, well, no, they're not body snatchers, they're murderers. No point if they actually dug up their own grave. Yes, they're selling bodies to anatomists, similar but not the same. But it's the art of politely telling somebody that they're wrong without bollocking them for it. Because it's not their fault they're wrong. They've just taken in the wrong. They've just taken in the wrong information.
Yeah, and also accepting the fact that you're not going to persuade most people that they are wrong on something. If they've got an entrenched view about something, that's it. You can, I know that with the views I get here, and someone comes on and gives a proper alternative view of something, but there's a mainstream view out of there that's wrong. A few dozen or a few hundred or a few thousand people watching my channel is not gonna stop that. The world is not gonna stop thinking that Napoleon was short. The world is not gonna stop thinking some of these things there. But all you can do is chip away and reach. Yeah. It's like podcasting. You're reaching a small number of people that may become a big group of people, that may become a large number of people. But just do your bit. Do your bit to dispel.
I'd like to change somebody's mind. If they don't, I'm not too worried about it. In my day job, I work in advice. The advice that I give, you should follow. If people don't, I'm not too worried if you don't. That's on you. But yeah, we've taken on some pretty entrenched myths. When Matt Bone came on and went, Spitfire, not all that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the backlash of that one.
Yeah, no, definitely. I enjoyed that one. That was one of your better ones. Well, I like them all, but I like the World War II one. That's my thing. We'll do a few more questions, then we'll bring things to an end. So,
actually,
just kind of a comment from. Sorry.
So if I can just duck in on that one, because your episode was actually bang on one of those entrenched myths. You came on and step by step why Omaha Beach is not a disaster.
Yeah. It's on my mug. I have my history range. Mag uses it for a coffee because I don't drink coffee. But yeah, no, exactly. So another podcaster, History of the Second World War podcast, saying the only way you will stick with something is if you like making it. It can take a long time to build an audience. You have to love the art of active creation. I think that's some really solid advice there, is that don't be driven by views, listens, downloads, advertising. Be driven by what you want to do, which comes to another question, which is a really good one I'll put to you, Paul, from Ivan, is saying how to balance responsiveness to listener requests versus doing your own thing.
So I tend not to get a great, well, I do get listener requests, but what I get is I get listeners that want to come on and rage. I have a number of ways of dealing with that. If you're getting a lot of listener requests, do it. That's what your audience wants to hear. If it's not outside, the scope of what you're doing, if you're going back to the YouTube channel of the War in the Pacific, if you're getting a load of people saying, I want you to follow 10 Thessalonians France, and then, well, no, it's not my remit. So you want to go here for that. But yeah, if you're getting a lot of the same thing, it's part of that engagement, and it will help. And it will help the download numbers, and it will help you bring that up. If it's totally outside your scope, then it's not going to make a good episode because you're not going to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would say it's a difficult one to answer that without sort of knowing the sort of listener requests that you'd be thinking of, or in fact, how many that you're getting and whether or not you're snowed under by them. But if you are snowed under by listener requests, you can save yourself a lot of decision making by going along with them if they fit within where you're going. I get a few people that will come in and go, I'd like you to do this rage. Sometimes I'll go on board with it. Sometimes that guest isn't what I'm after. So I'll have a listener that contacts me, and I don't have a kind of high bar for guests. But what I say is that I want you to at least be some form of content producer. Okay, so that can be, you could be a podcaster, you could be an author, you could be a YouTuber, you could be a blogger. So long as I can say, if you want to know more about this subject and engage with this person, you can go and read this thing, you can go and look at this, you can buy this book. Okay, if you've just got somebody on where I can't do that, then I kind of politely decline and say, I'm going to draw the line there. Or you get that ridiculous thing that you're just not going to touch. I think it took 8 months before I got my first comment that said, I want to raise that the 12th SS are misunderstood. No.
No, yeah, no.
Move along.
I'm bombarded with people who want me to discuss Hitler getting to Argentina, but not to debunk it, to say that he did. And I'm like, no, fuck off.
I'm quite the reverse.
There'll be someone who'll listen to your rantings, but it won't be me. I don't care. Just, bye. Trevor's asking, best length for a podcast. For me, not less than 30, not more than 60.
Absolutely no right or wrong answer to this. Is the flat, grey, dull answer to that question. I have a tendency to make history rage about the length of a work commute where I can. But it depends if there's anything that you want to cut out. So my shortest episode is 27 minutes.
Right.
My longest episode is an hour and 20. I haven't seen massive differences in a drop-off rate or anything like that between them. Really comes down to how engaging my guest is. But if people want a guide, I go between 45 minutes to an hour, because that's the length of the typical work commute, which is where a lot of my listeners are listening to.
Makes sense.
And if you're thinking you are content producing and you're a little lost as to, am I going too long? Am I going too short? Ask your audience.
Yeah.
They'll tell you.
And that's the thing that, and this advice will be transferable to YouTubers and podcasters and bloggers and stuff, is that you'll get to a certain audience number when it is more than just your best friend and your wife listening to you, when you will get, and that's the nature of human beings, is that you'll get that range of opinions. And I find it quite amusing that I will have on the same video, you talk too much, you don't talk enough. This is too long, too short. You do too much on the Eastern Front, not enough on the Eastern Front. You're pro-British, you're pro-American, you're too left-leaning, you're too right-leaning. I get that all the time. You get that paradoxically, and you're being accused of two things at the same time. And you think, well, okay, ultimately, you can't please everybody. You'll be too long for some people, not long enough for other people, too much content for some, not enough for others. It comes back to that kind of an idea. What is it that you want to do? How do you want to do it? What length of discussions do you as the host want to have? And kind of use that as your starting point. Again, for my advice is, don't be driven too much by what you think the people out there want, because you can't speak for all of them. You can only speak for those of them that interact with you. And that's the weird thing about this. I'm not ranting now, is that only 2 or 3% of my audience are actually interacting with me regularly. Now, they're great people, but that 2 or 3% might not be speaking for the other 97%. I can't assume that their voice carries across. It might do, but I have to kind of look at all sorts of things, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So MJ and NH is saying, I've been working on a podcast and this information is gold. It is hard to figure the whole system out. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome. And like I say, any advice that anybody wants following this, get in touch. I'm always happy to help.
And Sir Capo is asking, what's the difference between doing YouTube videos versus a podcast? We've kind of elaborated on that a little bit. And it varies within podcasting. There are different types of podcasts and there are different types of YouTubing. And I primarily use the live streaming. Other people do the uploads, and they're different. And again, it's what's the audience looking for? So that's the complicated one. But he's also saying, would it be viable to do content about early modern history like the 17th and 18th centuries, the Sun King, the Lace Wars, etc.? Since I'm more interested in this and that, and I'm going, yes, of course. Yes, there'll be someone else there who is interested in that. So whatever the subject, biscuits, your favorite football terrace, there'll be someone else interested in it somewhere.
Never be afraid of niche, okay? Because what you get, if you're a broad church of history and you cover everything, then you can get yourself quite a large audience because you're always going to hit something that somebody's interested in. If you've got a niche subject, what you're going to have is you'll have a smaller audience, but you'll have a more loyal audience.
Yeah,
and that can deliver its own rewards. I mean, I'm part of a podcasting network based around Manchester called the Mike's Podcast Club, and we meet up about once a month on Zoom and share ideas and tips and hints and things like that. So like I said earlier, I've got 12,500 downloads a month. There's a lady on there that does a podcast about playing bridge. She has got a fraction of my listener base, but yet makes 3 times the money I do. Because she's got an absolutely loyal listener base to the point where a company sponsored it. Because do not be afraid of niche.
Which is a very good point to ask Trevor's question about how much money can be made with a half-decent podcast or YouTube channel. I'll do YouTube first, then you can do podcast. Thing is, you have to make conscious decisions. You have to decide. I've said this on my Ask Many Things. I turn down sponsorship. I don't want to interrupt one of my history chats and say, by the way, before we go back to the Battle of Midway, here's a protein bar that I've been eating a lot of recently. You can buy these protein bars, and if you enter the code, I get those offers all the time for various things. I don't want to have my viewers put up with that, even though that would bring me in cash, because I feel that my audience space would not want that. Other channels might feel that their audience base will put up with that because of what they're doing. So do you want to have ads in the middle of your stream? Do you not want to have ads? And so there is money to be made, but don't be thinking that there's lots of money to be made. I make the great majority of my funding from my Patreon supporters. What actually comes in from YouTube is about 20% of what comes in from Patreon. So it's and thank you, by the way, anyone who's watching this who is a patron. I had lunch with a patron today. And by the way, folks, the link to my Patreon is in the description below. Please consider becoming a patron and paying a small amount every month to help me do this. So there's lots of options and decisions you have to make. And podcast is a little bit more rigid in terms of the average, because you said it earlier on. But what's your response?
So you can make decent money from podcasting, but it's going to take you a long time to do so. So like I say, you've just got to build up that catalog and build that movement. History Edge is in profit. I'm about a third of the way of where I need to be in order to actually give up my day job. And that's where I need to be, not where I want to be to give up my day job, but to just be able to survive. I'm about a third of the way there. It's about 50-50 split between ad revenue from Acast. So once you're over like 2,000 downloads a month, Acast will look at you. There are other ad providers out there. I've gone with Acast because it was just easy. They're part of my host. They're pretty good in terms of selling it, but I get probably around about £240 a month from ads, and I get about just shy of about £280 a month from Patreon, and probably sell a few mugs, which adds about another £10 in there. So you're looking at about that kind of 420, and that's after going at it for 2.5 years.
Yeah, there are people making serious money out of this, which in its own way brings its own problems. Some of the bigger YouTubers I know, that because you end up getting to the point where you need to have staff and you start paying people for editing and you start paying. So having money coming in doesn't necessarily cure things. It just opens up another set of decisions and how you're going to operate your podcast, your YouTube thing. So there is money to be made, but there's also, don't go into it. If you go into it to make lots of money, then it's a slow investment. You won't get an instant return in your first few months or years. It's a long-term thing, and you have to put a hell of a lot of effort in, and the first few years will be basically unpaid, won't they? There's no, unless you strike gold. There's always that YouTuber or podcaster who comes out the gates flying with something that's just hits that spot that someone needs, and they go to millions of downloads within a few weeks, but they're very rare.
Yeah, and it took about 18 months for History Edge to actually turn a profit overall, to pay off everything that I'd spent on microphones and everything like that. It's possible, but it's a long haul. Yeah.
Well, there we are. I think we will leave it there, Paul, and viewers. Thanks for your questions, and we'll do some more of these with other historians and podcasters, because there's no secrets. And as I said at the beginning, that what works for one channel doesn't necessarily transfer across to others. And I find that cooperation and collaboration, and I'll echo what Paul says about, going on other people's podcasts and working with other people and discussing what worked for them and what doesn't work for you. And I think also remember that you've got to be a little bit showbiz about it. You know, you've got to kind of eventually find your presenting voice, your style, your ability to just project. And it doesn't come natural to everybody. It didn't come natural to me. I had to kind of work on it. And I look at my early episodes now and think, good grief. But you know, yeah, there's a bit of show business about it. There's like with you're going to Chalk Valley, you've got to put a bit of an act on as well.
Yeah. Well, good luck, and everybody out there who's thinking of podcasting, remember rule 1: just fucking do it.
Just fucking do it. There we are. I'll get some t-shirts made. World War II TV, History Rage, shared experience. Just fucking do it. And talking about what we got coming up, Seth is back tomorrow for part 2 of our Philippine Sea Great Marianas, the turkey shoot show. I'm looking forward to that, and other things coming up. And we'll get the show rescheduled with Caroline Moorhead when we can work out her tech problems. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, guest. Click like and subscribe. Go and visit History Rage. Download all those episodes. Start with my one, obviously, because it's the best, and then go through the others. And I will see you all again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody. Bye.